But yeah. Hello everyone, and welcome to our final virtual tasting of the of 2021. Yeah, 2021. We've got Stef and Gaby with us this evening, and we're going through our smoke tasting. So we're going to be pairing mezcal and smoky whiskey together, which will be really interesting. Some really good stuff on there. So as usual, hello to anybody watching it at a later date as well, because I know a few people like to watch it over the weekend and after the event. And if you want to go back and see any bits, you'll be able to go back onto the YouTube and it will be on there. As always as well, any questions, pop them in the comment box. We can put them forward, or drop me an email and I can pop it forward as well. So yeah, but yeah, we'll wait a few minutes just to get everybody settled in and make sure everybody's on board.
I can't believe this is your last one, Hannah. You've done so many this year, huh?
I know, it's our last virtual tasting. It's not going to be the end of virtual tastings, because I think there's a few people, you know, for like a private event, there's a few people that have really enjoyed it, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen. Fingers crossed we don't go into another lockdown again and all that jazz, but we're hoping to get some actual in-person tastings booked in for next year. It's on my to-do list to plan for Christmas, so we should hopefully have a lineup ready for Christmas, at least for some at the beginning of next year anyway, of some events in person, because it'd be nice to finally meet Stef and Gaby, because I've done a few tastings now with you guys virtually. We're not actually met in person, so yeah, it'd be lovely to do some in person. But yeah, our final one. So there's a few people that I think have come to like, or have been on pretty much every single virtual tasting. So thank you very much to those people that have stuck through and gone with them. Obviously, it's not been ideal to do them in this format, but it has worked as well. We've had kind of pros and cons to it, and it means we can reach people further afield.
And yeah, I think the lack of travelling home and stuff as well, I quite like. Yeah. I think if everyone's tasting stuff as well, obviously it's difficult, isn't it, with booze and driving?
Yes. That's what. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. That's why I've got my little spittoon with me, because I have to drive home.
But it's been a great program as well. Like I've looked through, obviously, all the different tastings you've done. You've some really interesting stuff. Fantastic.
I'm not going to lie, I do feel like I could be an unofficial brand ambassador for Speciality Brands.
Of course, I'm sure you can.
Like secret plan, darling.
Yeah. The amount of times I've gone through some of them now, like I know these products now, which is great because it's good for me to like really know them, to be able to sell them properly. But yeah, it's quite funny. It's a great way of learning about them as well, I think, without kind of having to sit and sort of study something, which is good. So, yeah. But yeah, the last one for a while. Well, we've got some private tastings in November, but December is not usually a time to do tastings. No. It's usually a time when we'll be running around like headless chickens, especially this year. So yeah, a little break in December and then back in the new year with some where we can actually be in person, and I don't have to pour little samples into little tiny samples.
Yeah, that's the thing for me and Gaby. This is much easier. We don't have to. We're sitting home. We'd have to do tons of the work, whereas you've already made up the kits. So
yeah. So the worst, no, to be fair, this one wasn't too bad, but I don't know if you remember, we did the smoky whiskey tasting, the Isla one, I think back in March or a while ago. And I think we sold something like 75 kits.
Whoa.
So we had to make up about 75 boxes of them. The shop literally looked like a bomb had hit it. There was straw everywhere, boxes, like all sorts of stuff. It was, that was a long process.
Of course it is.
So, yeah. Anyway, I can't complain. It's been good. It's been really good to have it. So, yeah. So, shall we make a start?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we're going to talk about smoke. So, for those who haven't met us before, who haven't seen us before, I'm Stef. I am going to be talking mostly about whiskey this evening and smoky whiskies, obviously, from a variety of countries. And then we also have the lovely Gaby, just here. who is well, we work for the same company called Speciality Brands, and Gaby is our agave ambassador, so looks after tequila and mezcal. And so she will be focusing on the agave side of things this evening. But obviously the main point of all of this is talking about smoky spirits, smoke, how it gets in there, and kind of why we like it. So we're going to start off with a bit of an introduction into smoke itself, before running into the tasting section. So bear with us for just a wee minute. We're going to go back quite a while. Not going to do it year by year, you'll be glad to know, but for a very long time, the flavor of smoke has been kind of part of the, part of the human experience, part of what we have eaten and drunk and tasted. And, I think obviously there's that saying, there's no smoke without fire. I think also it works the other way around. When we first discovered fire, we were probably pretty rubbish at making fires. I'm not sure if anyone, has tried making fires in their houses or out in the wild. But when you're not good at it, they're usually quite smoky and quite rubbish. And then as you get better, they get a little bit less smoky and a little bit more able to come inside. So obviously, we've got cavemen here, and looking at, using fire to cook food. But of course, the smoke associated with that was a flavor that sort of permeated everything. If you're, let's say, imagine in a cave and you've got a fire right at the entrance of your cave, everything inside your cave would be smoky. Everything you eat and drank, that was warm, you would be cooking over fire. And the interesting thing about the timing when we sort of started using fire also coincides with the time that our brains started developing. This was partly because we could start cooking our food. You can get a lot more calories from the same type of food if it's cooked. So that suddenly meant we could use a lot more energy, and our brain started growing and using that energy. But also it kind of lengthened our days. We used to have to go to bed, go to sleep when it got dark, and suddenly we were able to stay up and grunt at each other around the campfire. And that actually, at the same time as when we started developing language, as well as kind of potentially art and civilization as well. So fire and smoke are all kind of tied in with tons and tons of the stuff that kind of make us human. I think the other thing that's quite interesting is it's also the same time as we started developing smell and taste. Again, the sort of smell of smoke would be something that would sort of indicate to us that food was either cooked, so therefore potentially safer to eat and going to be quite nutritious, or that's been preserved. I'm sure people know about sort of preserving food by smoke, but also, discovered it by accident. If you're hanging up half the mammoth that you killed last week in your cave, and you hang it up in a bit of the cave that's smokier, that will last longer. It will not go off, not spoil as quickly as the bit of mammoth that's stored somewhere else. So the smell and taste of smoke to us suddenly became like a sort of safe, comforting kind of smell and taste. And so I think, nowadays we think of the smell of smoke as something we add. You choose a smoked cheese, you choose a smoked ham, you choose a smoky whiskey because you feel like it. Well, we kind of didn't have those choices all these years ago. We just, everything would have tasted of smoke. And like I say, to us, our associations in our brain would have meant it, but it would be quite comforting. So just to sort of go forward a little bit now into science, so the opposite side, but what is smoke? And when you burn any kind of organic matter, whether that's wood or branches or leaves or, any kind of thing, that you make, the vast majority of what you make is actually just steam. So, that's the kind of white bits of smoke. And then there's a lot of ash, which is just kind of carbonized material. But you also form a small quantity of what are called phenols. And these are the kind of chemical components here that are called phenols. So this is a phenol ring, this hexagon here, and that's their carbons banded together. And then these phenols can have different arm structures, and that will give them slightly different smells and tastes to us. So I think a lot of people also think that smoky is one flavor. There is one flavor of smoke, and that is it. Whereas if you're into barbecuing, you'll know that smoking something over apple wood, doing it over cherry wood, doing it over different types of wood will give you different flavors, and that's kind of what these different phenols give. So there's loads and loads and loads of different phenols. Some, glycol focus mostly on give you more of a smell, but you don't taste them as much, and others are more taste and less smell. And here's just some of the sort of, example flavors that you'll get from just some of these phenols. So, we've got everything from carbolic, medicinal, woody, sweet, smoky, nice, spicy, meaty clove. So there's all kinds of different smoky flavors, and depending what you're burning and how you're burning them, what conditions you're burning it in, you will get different combinations of these different phenols, and therefore smokes will taste different. And that's kind of what we're going to look into tonight. We're going to look at different smokes, flavors in these spirits that we're tasting, and they will be, the reasons the smokes taste the way they do will be because of how the things have been made. Okay, so now I'll hand over to Gaby, who's going to talk a little bit about smoke in Mexican culture.
Thank you, Steph. So yes, of course, in every place in the world, smoke was very important. In Mexico, we'll imagine as well that in our country, it was super important and it's still very important. In fact, smoke is considered sacred. It is used for rituals as well as to clear a house, to clear the ambience. It's actually that it's proven that smoke actually helps to clear air, obviously from certain resins or from certain herbs. It is believed that it heals certain respiratory sicknesses. Also, it's considered therapeutic and medicinal. Obviously, for us, was very important. Also, imagine, no, it's Mexico. Usually, it's hotter, particularly in the southern part of Mexico. We for sure were using smoke, not only to keep something or to preserve something, because only we need to preserve the food, but also perhaps to repel certain insects and things like that. So yes, super important. We usually use copal, which is a resin of a tree, or we might use wood or barks or sage. I don't know. Think on all those sort of flavors, and each aroma or each thing, each element will give us different aromas, different elements, different approach to whatever we're doing in our rituals, let's call them. Obviously, still used a lot right now in Mexico. And today we are going to speak how mezcales are smoky, because not many people know. Many people think that it's very similar to mezcal. In a way, it is, but in so many ways, it's not. Why we're trying to say this? Well, basically, mezcal gets smoke at the very, very beginning of the process. So first of all, we need to understand what is an agave. An agave is a beautiful plant that is native to the Americas. It grows from Arizona all the way to Patagonia. There are more than 200 different species of agaves, and they are all slightly different. Some are tall, or another ones are very short. Some develop yellow stripes, some are gray, some are green, and there are several different varieties and sub-varieties of agaves.
I'm a big fan of that purple one in the top right, Gaby.
Yeah.
See. In fact, not all agaves actually give us the sugars to produce mezcal, so you might have seen it as well in many places. However, I actually mentioned it's native to the Americas, but it's so beautiful as a plant itself that is already in so many places in the world. So you might have seen it in Sri Lanka, India, Africa, in the Mediterranean islands.
Kew Garden.
I was going to say, I saw one in Glasgow, in the Botanical Gardens in Glasgow. It was gorgeous. It's such a lovely plant.
It is.
The poor agave is like, what am I doing here?
See, I know, but I'm sure. I mean, the agave itself is a very resilient plant. It does sort of adapt to so many different kind of weathers. But of course, there is some weathers that it cannot sort of support. Exactly. But actually, here in London as well, I've seen houses with huge agaves. Now, agave is called also the century plant because it can live, according to some biologists, even 100 years. And when it lives 100 years, it doesn't mean that you're gonna die and the plant is still there. I mean, it might be, of course, but it also, when the agave reach full maturity, it grows a stalk right in the center. That stalk, we call it quiote. And once the stalk grow, the heart of the agave don't have the sugars anymore because it have given it all to the quiote. But then eventually, if the quiote continue growing, it eventually gives you seeds and branches and everything. That plant, as the quiote itself, can last for so many other years. So yeah, it's super, super interesting plant to study, to know more. Every time I have got the chance, I keep learning because it's really beautiful. In fact, the name agave comes from Greek mythology. The first ever person who was studying agaves, he actually said, well, you have to get the name of Princess Agabi because you are beautiful, sublime, elegant, and you have to take her name. Yeah, this is, again, very romantic. Now, as I mentioned, agave is native to the Americas. Although almost all the Americas, or at least, I don't know, North to Central America has a lot of agave. The vast majority of agaves are found in Mexico. We believe we host about 75% of the different varieties. And with that, obviously, we need to think and approach agave, or each variety of agave, like if it was a different kind of grape. Each grape gives us different wine. Same with mezcal in mezcal production. Each agave gives us different profiles. The agave is obviously, it does gets the flavor from where it grows as well as from the weather, the altitude, the air, everything. You will actually get to try some pretty amazing products today. They're all totally different, and I will get there, but yeah, it's delicious. They're all beautiful and different.
I think just like grapes as well, that obviously for you guys and Hannah, you also sell wine as well, growing those same, varietals in different places under different, conditions will give you completely different flavors, which is super interesting. I always love exploring that.
I think that's the thing people don't realize as well with tequila and mezcal, that they don't sometimes realize that tequila is a mezcal. It's a form of mezcal. And then when you sort of explain to people that with mezcal, it is like wine in that you can get, like Gaby just mentioned, it's very influenced by its environment as well, and that does really have an impact on it. And then suddenly the penny sort of drops for people, and they're like, oh, okay, so it's not just one sort of singular thing. There's obviously lots of great tequilas out there, but obviously they're from one particular type of agave, and it's really nice to see a kind of variety of it, and how it differs as well in flavor, because they are very different, from different areas, just like it is with wine.
Just to give you an example, it is true. Actually, a grape or a vine will give us almost every year. It will give us grapes to produce wine. In mezcal or tequila, the fastest growing agave takes us at least 8 years to reach full maturity, to then give us enough sugars to then produce mezcal or tequila. But then once you harvest the agave, you have to let the soil to rest for 2 years, and eventually again replant another agave and wait for another 8 years at least, depending which agave you are growing. But yeah, it's amazing, and it's just so vast how we can actually talk about it. I'll get deeper into that, but this is a map of Mexico overlapping Europe. Not that I mean to do that, but it's just to give you an example of how big is Mexico. Mexico is the size of 24 European countries, so it's pretty big. And when we're talking even sometimes about only one variety of agave, if that variety is growing in the south, the agave will behave. Sometimes it will look slightly different. It gives us different profiles, even if it's the same variety, but it's just planted somewhere else in Mexico. So it's very different. Also, it's fair to know that only Mexico was domesticated the plant and did agave spirits. Nowadays, of course, you can see other agave spirits made in other places in the world, but it was only Mexico, the one who actually adored the plant and did spirits out of the plant. And this is another map of Mexico again, but this is where I show you the clear sort of green are the states of Mexico who right now are part of the denomination of origin of mezcal. Why do we say this? Well, because almost all Mexico for many years have been making mezcal for hundreds of years. In fact, mezcal is believed to be the oldest liqueur made in the Americas. And basically, Mexico was producing mezcal almost all over Mexico, but right now, only 9 states are part of the denomination of origin, meaning that those states are following certain rules that the mezcal sort of denomination rulers, which is a council really, are telling us to do, right? So often these rules are to keep consistency, to keep all the customers sort of, like protection for everybody. That's what a denomination really does. So only 9 states of Mexico are part. The other ones who are not part of the denomination, but they have been making mezcal for many years, are called agave spirits, even though they're made in Mexico following every single rule. This is how tough the denomination of origin of mezcal is.
Yeah, super strict rules, isn't there, Gabby?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in whiskey quite often think that whiskey is one of the only, one of the main spirits that's got kind of quite strict rules.
Yeah.
And I think finding out about mezcal
I just like to
really interesting.
mention, agave spirits, also in this case, mezcal, is the biggest as a territory denomination of origin in the world. Biggest in just one country, of course, because you are saying as well, whiskey is very big and many other countries do it. But in this case, Mexico itself is one of the biggest. And also we can say it's the most biodiverse denomination, because again, one agave you planted somewhere else, that agave will give you different profile in another place, even though you follow exactly the same recipe that your neighbor state have done it. So yeah, the biodiversity is great, it's big. So now you might wonder, what is the difference then in between mezcal and tequila? Well, this is a simple sort of design that we did for you guys. So basically, mezcales. So this is basically all tequilas were called mezcal from a town called Tequila. So now, mostly all the mezcales at the very beginning were cooked. All the agaves were cooked under the ground. How do we do that? Basically, we dig a hole, then we build a bonfire. The bonfire obviously is using wood from around the area. Then we obviously wait for a little bit. We put rocks, usually from volcanoes or from rivers. We wait until those rocks get super, super hot. The fire is off. And then we will start to put the heart of the agave, already harvested, of course, without the leaves, without the green. Only the heart, the center of the agave, will go into that earthen oven. Eventually, we cover them, and then we leave them to cook there for a few days, for even a week. And after that, the agave is cooked. Now, the difference between mezcal and tequila here is that tequila was a mezcal produced in Tequila town in the state of Jalisco, in central Mexico. And when the Europeans arrived in Mexico and settled in Mexico, they were producing a lot of mezcal in tequila. But when they started to produce mezcal, they also brought different technologies, and those technologies, or one of those, was to cook the agave in steam oven. So that will actually, we will be using a boiler fed by wood, but you don't need as much wood as you will need for the earthen oven. The mezcal that came out from that oven was exceptional. It was elegant. People want that mezcal from tequila. Now, the denomination of origin sort of cuts us off and separates it. And basically, mezcal can be done in those 9 states of Mexico that I told you. And in those 9 states of Mexico, we have different kinds of agaves, endemic agaves. And we think there are between 30 to 50 different kinds of agaves that we are using right now for mezcal production. While tequila, when they did the denomination of origin in 1974, they decided to use one species of agave only. And that species was chosen because it is endemic to central Mexico, to where Tequila town is settled, because Tequila used to be a volcano. And when the volcano exploded, which is over millions of years ago, the soil around there is super mineral that the agaves start to grow there were blue. And well, they did obviously some research and everything, and they decided to use the agave that represents tequila. That agave is also very generous agave. It gives us about, for every 8 kilos, we produce 1 liter of mezcal after around 8 to 12 years. While agaves for mezcal, they vary. You can have those agaves that grow for 8 years, but we have other agaves that it take us longer than 20, even 30 years to reach full maturity. So tequila can be done only in 5 states of Mexico, and that is because we needed help. Not only Tequila Town was able to produce the mezcal, so the mezcal from tequila at that point, we asked other states to be part of our denomination, so they have also have to grow blue agave, and well, that's the story mainly. So here is where we go into the process. What do we need then to make mezcal? Well, in reality, you need a lot of manpower. You need agave and you need Mexico. You need sunshine, you need water, all those kind of natural elements, but it's definitely made by people. You cannot just get a machine to harvest the agave. You need people. And this is beautiful. Each mezcal has a story, and we will tell you a few of our beautiful brands. So after we harvest the agave, we take them, we cook them under the ground. By the way, I should let you know that not all mezcales are cooked under the ground. Many mezcales will use the technology that tequila does as well. In this case, the first are we already talking about the first mezcal, Steffi?
We're heading in that direction, yes, darling.
Perfect. So I'll start to tell the story about the mezcal that we're going to try first. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
See? Okay, so with the first mezcal that we're going to try today is actually Ilegal Mezcal Joven. Exactly what lovely Hannah is showing us in the screen. So this mezcal is made 100% from one sort of, or one variety of agave called agave espadín. We cook the agaves under the ground in a pit fire like this. Basically, remember the agave don't have contact direct with the fire. It goes direct to sort of be cooked with the heat of the rocks. Now, we cover those agaves with a blanket. Obviously, after they are all in the oven, we cover them with a blanket, and then we wait for 4 days to 1 week, depending how big is the oven, how many tons of agave we put. Now, here is where we need to talk about smoke. How do we get the smoke then? Well, because the agave is getting cooked inside of the oven, there is combustion, of course, because there was wood. So while the agave is getting cooked in the oven, the smoke from the wood is then reaching the agaves, and the agaves are absorbing those smoky notes. And that, ladies and gents, is how mezcal gets smoky. Okay?
And
so
the agave's on the, sorry, Gaby. The agave's on the inside, when they're raw before they're cooked. They feel a bit like a potato, right?
Yeah, so basically it's like a potato with fibers. The actual, I don't know how do we say this, but the actual inside of the agave, we used to say it's a starch, but it's like a starchy thing, but it's not even a starch. We also used to say that it's inulina, but apparently recently somebody discovered that it's just a particular sugar from that only is develops in agave that is called agavina. So they already call it, but yes, it's like a sort of a potato with fibers. It's tasteless. You bite it, it doesn't taste like nothing, and it has certain enzyme that it also attacks you. So many people have said that it even have a stomach ache after eating raw agave. So never eat raw agave. It doesn't anyway taste nothing nicer. So yeah, don't do it. After the agave is cooked, it's just so delicious.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if anyone is into kind of health foods and stuff, but agave syrup is something you can buy. Obviously that's usually made without the fire, isn't it? That's usually just cooked in an oven or a steam kind of thing to not take any flavor, right?
Yeah. Also, agave syrup, it used to be only 100% made of cooking the agave and squeezing it. And that was the pure sugar of agave. However, obviously, nowadays, there are bigger companies who make agave, and they for sure do something else. But to be honest, I cannot tell you much about it because I haven't visited any distillery or production of agave syrup. As soon as I go to visit, I will definitely make sure everybody knows about it. So then, how did we crush the agave? In the old school times, we used to use this sort of sledgehammer sort of thing, or this sort of stick Obviously, people have been suffering a lot lately because they think it's a lot of hard work. There is another sort of ways of squeezing the agave, such as a trapiche, which is the one on top, and that is basically a squeezer. And then the other one, which is old school way how to crush olives for olive oil production or grains for flour production. That was introduced as well by the Europeans when they arrived to Mexico. They taught us the way of crushing agave using the help of animals and very heavy rocks, particularly volcanic rocks. And that method, we call it tajona. Tajona is actually the name of the wheel, but obviously the way of crushing the agave, we call it tajona. And then obviously you need to produce a spirit, you need to do fermentation. So first we cook the agave to convert the sugars into fermentable sugars. You squeeze the agave, but obviously the tajona, trapiche, or the sledgehammer are super inefficient. So what do? Basically, we put the whole fibers of the agave in a vat, and that vat we will add water, and then obviously we're just expecting the yeast to come and have a big party because it's just pure sugar. Once they eat all the sugar, obviously we have the dead most. We have a beer out of, I don't know, let's say from 5 to 8 alcohol per volume. And voila, it's obviously we wait for depending 3 days up to even 10, 15 days, depending on the amount or the size of the vat and the weather as well, the weather conditions. Now, there are several ways of distillation. The way that you see basically at the top, the first one with the fire that you see is actually called Filipino still, as well as the one in the bottom. Actually, wait a second. The one at the top, the one at the bottom, and the one that you see on your right, they are all Filipino still. We believe and we know that Filipino people used to come by the Pacific Ocean and they taught us the way of distillation. So how it is, basically, it's very old school way. It is very similar to how to distill, I think it's soju in Japan. So direct fire, and then you produce your own pot still made of either wood or clay. Well, we understood how to do it, and we start to do it for mezcales. So there are several ways how to distill, and this will also sort of give us another layer of different flavors. No, as I mentioned, Mexico is so big, you can use different agaves. The producer will have a different touch. And also you can do different ways of fermentation. You can do different ways of distillation. Everything will then add up to give us a totally different product.
This is super traditional though, right, Gabby? So quite a lot of the mezcals that are made are not made using Filipino stills. They're more using the European style.
Yes, certainly. So these producers who you see over here are often already recognized to be ancestral way of production of mezcal. But there are so many other little things that sort of take us out the ancestral because we don't use sledgehammer and we got the help of I don't know, wood chipper to shred the agave, and then they take us the denomination, let's say, of ancestral, and we go back to being artisanal. But yes, these kind of things are super old school.
Mm.
And then obviously after we distill, we have to distill twice. We have mezcal. So now mezcales, usually they took this sort of fashion of wine. You can do mezcales out of one agave as well as 2, 3, or 5 different varieties of agaves in just one bottle. Often you will see 1 or 2, maybe 4. I haven't seen 5, only because now people understand that we have so many different varieties of agaves that is fair to let them shine each by themselves. And obviously, what you mentioned, what you have over there as well, we have barrels. We can also age mezcal, but mezcal really takes such a long time that many people don't bother to bring a barrel to Mexico because it's a denomination of origin. It has to be bottled in Mexico in the denomination, in the place of origin. So many people don't bother to age. But today we are trying illegal mezcal, and illegal mezcal has brothers. But anyway, so what is illegal mezcal? It's a beautiful mezcal, which is super, well, I think it's beautiful. It's very elegant. It's approachable. The bottle is sleek. It has beautiful ethos. Let me tell you a little bit about the story. So there is this guy called John Rexer. He's from New York State. And he always wanted to travel around Latin America. One day he woke up and he said, it's time to go. He drove in his car and he crossed the whole of, almost the whole of Mexico, and he arrived to the south state of Oaxaca. In Oaxaca, he spent his time drinking beer and mezcal by the beach, and he has a lovely time. Apparently, 6 months after, he realized his visa was about to expire, so he decided to, get a new visa. Rather than crossing all the way back north to the US, he decided to go to our southern neighbor country, which is Guatemala. In Guatemala, he arrived there and he was driving, he was tired, and he decided to go for a walk. And while he was walking, he was crossing through this beautiful cobble street that you see in the picture. And while he was over there, he was saying hello to the people outside and all. But then he noticed there was a door half open and a sign outside that says for rent, se renta. He opened the door and nobody's there. So he enters and notices the place is empty. And he's like, perfect, I'm just gonna crash here and we'll sleep. But all surprised, the owner of the place arrived and said, hey, hello, good evening. So what do you like my place for? And John Rexer have to invent a story, because obviously, if not, otherwise he's just breaking an interest, no? So he told him that he always wanted to do a bar. He wanted to sell only beers and mezcal, and here and there, and we put the bar here, books there, live music there. And the owner loved the idea and told him, okay, I give you 3 months of free rent, so this place has to work. The day after, John Rexer stood up, woke up, and he like, well, I've got 3 months of free rent. I'm just going to do it. And that's what he did. He called the suppliers of Guatemala. As I mentioned, only Mexico have adopted and made mezcal in the world at that point. He called the suppliers, nobody had mezcal. So he like, well, I'm just gonna go and buy it. So he started to travel to Mexico, buy bulk of mezcal and bring it to his bar, selling it and going back to Mexico and doing that for so many months. Eventually, he noticed that he was being watched by the border patrol either in Mexico and Guatemala. He decided to, he had other ideas how to get into the country without being recognized. One day, he went to a second-hand shop and he bought a priest collar. He found a priest collar, he wore it, and he crossed the border while thinking, everybody's super Catholic in Latin America, they will let me in for sure. So they told him, oh, hello, Father, how are you doing? And he said, yeah, good, how are you? Yes, good, okay, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I came for a celebration. And then, okay, cool. And they told him, and what do you have in your bag? And he said that he started to sweat cold and his blood went all the way to his feet and he was super scared. He like, oh my God, I've been caught. And then opened the bag and then the border patrol noticed that it was full of mezcal. And they told him, oh, Father, you're going to have a great party, don't you? Have a fun, and let him in. There are many little stories like that. Like another time, somebody either in Mexico, Guatemala, helped him to actually smuggle the mezcal through a river to Guatemala. And the story is so long that the actual, he started to kind of get nervous and he started to make money anyway out of the bar, the mezcal, everything. So he decided to do things right. He approached a family who were making very good mezcales in Oaxaca and told them he wanted to do a brand of mezcal. They said yes, they loved the idea. They had everything by the rules, no? And they said, perfect, let's do it. So he gave the idea of how he wanted to do the mezcal. They said, perfect. So they gave him several trials and everything. And eventually he tasted the one he really liked. And he said, this is it. And then they said, perfect, John, so how are you going to call the mezcal? And he said, it was illegal for such a long time. Let's keep it illegal. And this is also in honor to all the people who travel out of their own countries to do other jobs while they could do amazing spirits or products in their own country. So pretty much that's the idea. The ethos of the company are beautiful. They support a lot of communities, and well, I'm not gonna bother you too much in depth into that, but beautiful mezcal. The smoky note comes and is not overwhelming. It's actually, as I mentioned before, it's very approachable. So yes, we use agave espadín. The agave grows in Central Valleys in Oaxaca state, which is southwest Mexico. And as you notice, the agave it grows in an arid kind of a place. So when we grow the agaves in that sort of space, the agave does behave slightly different depending where it grows. And in this case, I believe that the agave did absorb smokiness, but in a very gentle way. It's very well done. Also, you need to know how to make mezcal. It's not because you have the book, you know the recipe, you're gonna make it properly. The people who produce mezcales know every single bit of it, from a smell, from watching it, everything.
And this, I think, Gabby, is a great place to start. And if someone's starting their mezcal journey tonight,
Agree.
This is a really great one. Quite a lot of the mezcals that we'll see in this country will be from Oaxaca, will be made using espadín, right? So
correct. So per se, this is an excellent sort of idea that you just gave me, Steph. Just to give you an example, I am from where tequila come from. And as you notice, no, tequila was considered the mezcal, that it was super elegant, approachable as well. It wasn't smoking, and it's usually in between 38 to 44 alcohol per volume. Nowadays, we find stronger tequilas. But in this case of mezcales also can be very pungent, or very strong, or very smoky. And in this case, mezcal is super, super approachable. So for me, who are used to tequila, this mezcal is sort of not necessarily only for beginners, because so many people love it as well. But it's also very versatile. So you can think on mezcal, in this case, legal, with tonic water in a Negroni, which, I mean, the classic cocktails that you think for whiskey, you swap it for mezcal, and you find these beautiful styles of drinks with this very, again, approachable style of mezcal.
It's,
40 alcohol per volume, by the way.
it's really lovely.
And
this
with the tax paid on the back.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are not illegal anymore.
No, yes, it's a bit on the back.
Yeah, we do.
But it's very silky. It's like very silky and fruity, and almost a bit like sour fruit.
Yes. What do you think, Hannah, about the smoky notes? What do you think? Is it too pungent, or is it?
No, I think they're really gentle, and
exactly.
they're there, but it's like that slightly like sweet sort of smoky note. That, say if you put like if you're barbecuing and you put kind of like fruit on the barbecue, or if you've got like a fruit kind of marinade on something, and those like gentle fruit sort of smokiness out of it.
And do you feel any sort of chili? I almost feel mezcal sometimes give me these sort of notes of either chili or a flower. For me, in this case, it's like a red dry chili.
Quite like peppery, like kind of red bell pepper and.
Yeah, it's a red something.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think this would make a great margarita.
Totally.
Favorite cocktail, margarita.
Easy. I mean, I was in an event one day, and they told me, what sort of drink do you want? And I was like, well, something that is easy, but at the same time that it takes kind of people out of the box, no? So there is this beautiful drink, according to me, but many people say it's horrible. I like it. Blood and Sand. So it's a classic drink with whiskey. 4 ingredients, same amount. So basically is whiskey, cherry liqueur, sweet vermouth, and fresh orange juice. So just ditch the whiskey and put mezcal, and voila, you have this beautiful mezcal drink with all those layers of flavors as well.
That sounds so good.
Yeah.
That sounds like the type of thing I love. I love it. See, I think like tequila and mezcal is one of my. It used to be a spirit I used to hate when I was at uni because I drank awful stuff. But as I've got older and as I've like learned more about it, it's become one of my favorite spirits. And I think it's a really versatile spirit. I think you could replace, if you take all your sort of classic cocktails, you can replace the white spirit in any of them. with a tequila or mezcal, and it works fantastically. I've had like a tequila with it in an espresso martini before, which works really nicely. You can put it into a Negroni. It works.
Irish whiskey.
Yeah, it just works so well.
Yeah.
I think that is the thing about, because it's not just replacing the white spirits, you can replace the brown spirits as well. And I think there's no other sort of spirit category that you can do that with. So if you're into your gin cocktails, you can chuck in a tequila or mezcal and get really elegant. But then if you're into your kind of bourbon or whiskey cocktails or your cognac cocktails, again, it works so well. Just the sort of depth of flavor. So super interesting. I think, again, if people here tonight are whiskey lovers and maybe are experiencing mezcal for the first time, they might be a little bit hesitant. Unaged spirit as well. This is 40% ABV and it's super smooth, really, really silky.
And yet so many flavors as well, no?
Exactly. Not burny at all. So, a lot of people have, prejudice, I think, about spirits from the Americas or other countries, countries they sort of see as less developed, and obviously European spirits is a kind of great snobbery about the cognacs and the whiskies and the things like that, and so hopefully people sort of realizing that these other countries are making incredibly smooth complex spirits as well.
I think one of the things that as well that we can touch on a bit more, but I think one of the things that people find, that I think we found with tequila and mezcal and agave spirits, is that especially in the UK is the kind of marketing around it. Obviously Cafe Patron have recently just got rid of Cafe Patron, and people are going mad because they're like, oh no, can't get it. I personally think it's a very clever move from them, because it moves them away from being just that spirit that you buy when you're out at a bar and you want a shot of something. It kind of moves them away from that, and I've seen they're trying to change their marketing strategy to make it more approachable in terms of an actual tequila and an actual kind of serious tequila, not just something that you have on a night out. But a lot of the marketing when it comes to tequila in the UK and mezcal is around that idea of doing tequila slammers, which is not very representative of what it is as a spirit. So I think that can also scare people a little bit. I think people, you mentioned tequila and they go, oh no, I can't drink tequila, I've had bad experiences on it. But usually those they're drinking are because they've been on a night out, someone's bought them a tequila shot and they're doing it with lime and salt, and you don't need lime and salt with any of these. So, yeah. But
I think it's an interesting thing, because we are kind of in the sort of top end of the market, and the same with whiskey. Just the Chancellor doing the duty thing the other day. People, I read sort of an article and it was sort of saying, the price of an average bottle of whiskey sold in the UK, it was something like 15 quid, and I was like, I actually can't think of a single what. And obviously, because the vast majority of what's sold volume wise is cheap stuff in supermarkets. So that's a thing that we're kind of very far removed from the mass market, far removed from the bulk of the sales in all directions.
Totally
Interesting. Right, sorry, there's some tasting notes.
So there you go. What we were saying as well, white pepper. You find a lot of sweetness from the agave. You might find this sort of woody flavor over here. Steph brought a wood shop. I love it. Fireplace, eucalyptus, because there is eucalyptus as well in the mix of the wood that we use to cook the agave. Pine, and pine is also important. Is where we actually did the fermentation. So definitely, somehow the flavors also of the wood that was part of our process also develop in certain way, that the smoky notes give us some beautiful flavors or aromas and all that. Green apple, leather, fireplace, sandalwood. I love sandalwood, totally.
Okay, thank you, Gaby. So we've I've just realised we've done 50 minutes and tasted one thing. We are going to go a little bit faster now. We had mezcal was always going to be the biggest explanation at the beginning. We're now going to jump over, and obviously, if you haven't finished all your illegal, try to take small sips and keep a little bit aside because we are going to pair it with whiskey number 1. But in the meantime, I'm going to quickly tell you about how whiskey gets smoky. So here we have a picture of Scotland, and beautiful. Hopefully everyone can imagine. Looks a bit damp, doesn't it? A little bit chilly. But one of the, for me, things that really struck me when I started looking into why people started making smoky whiskies is there's no trees here. And obviously in the old days, before we had electricity and all that kind of stuff, easily shippable coal, etc., etc. How do you heat your house? How do you cook your dinner? How do you make a cup of tea? And I always imagined that you'd chop some wood up and make a fire, but here you've not got anything to do that with either. Well, you have, and I think that's the thing that people don't realize is using peat wasn't for fun and it wasn't for flavor. It was for necessity. It was the only fuel source in a very cold, very wet place with hardly any trees around. And so basically, it is kind of just compacted dead plant matter. So if these nice bushy things, these mossy things all sort of, eventually die, fall over, another one grows on top of them, and layers of dead plants will grow up. And if it's in a wet place and there's enough moss that will hold the moisture in, the plants don't go off, don't decompose like they normally would, and they rather just sort of compress and eventually form this thing called peat, which you can dig up, you can dry out, and you can burn. So suddenly you have a fuel source from a very wet, inhospitable place. So here's some pictures of people harvesting peat, and actually the great thing about it is you don't have to dig too deep. For about the first 20 centimeters topsoil you need to get rid of, and then under 20 centimeters you can start getting usable peat. Now the stuff nearer the top looks a bit more planty, and you can sort of see fibers and bits of plant in it, but still if you dry it out you can burn it. You'll get a bit more smoke from that, a little bit less heat. And as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you'll start getting kind of peat litter, and then you get down to what's called garden peat or black peat, which is also much kind of a better fuel. It will give you less smoke and a little bit more heat. And if you go much deeper, and if you left that to sit and compact for even longer, eventually after a few more thousand years, you'd end up with coal. Okay, so this is what peat is. So like I say, people were using this not for fun. But you've got to be pretty desperate to think, how am I going to get some fuel? I know, I'll dig up the soil and see what happens. So this is some people harvesting it kind of old school way, and then obviously new school way. And like I say, it really forms in a boggy place, particularly. So you can't stick a big tractor on there. You've got to have a nice little light, nimble tractor on there to do that. But if anyone's been over to Islay or certain areas of Scotland, you'll have seen people kind of harvesting peat as if they've grown it. And then, like I say, you have to dry it before you can burn it. So, nowadays we'll look at the weather forecast and you'll lay it all out there to dry, and then put it in a shed. In the old days, you didn't really have big sheds, tiny little houses that you shared with your animals. And so what you'd do is you'd build these beautiful peat stacks, and actually there were kind of competitions in the old days, people making not only the prettiest but also the most useful ones. So for example, kind of almost mathematical way of calculating how to get the maximum amount of dry peat from a certain quantity of peat, and how to sacrifice the stuff on the outside but have that be as small a quantity, a smaller percentage as possible. And so there's a variety of different kind of peat stacking methods that were come up with to make sure you'd always have a nice supply of some dry stuff. So like I say, this will burn in different ways depending on how dry it is and also which section of the land it's come from. So you can get the stuff deeper down that will give you sort of a nice hot fire, and then the stuff from higher up will give you much more smokiness and less heat. And similar to the smoke entering the flavor of our mezcal, at the time when the smoky flavors, the phenols that I mentioned at the beginning, enter into the flavor of our whiskey is during the preparation of our raw material. So we've harvested barley. Barley is starch, just like agave, or complex sugars, complex carbohydrates, let's say, ones that we want to break up. And to do this, we soak them in water, and then we dry them. And when you're drying them, you can use in modern times a giant hairdryer if you like, and that will give you no change in flavor. But again, if you're in an area of Scotland with no trees, and you need to dry your barley, and you don't have a drying hairdryer because before electricity is invented, then this is what you use. You'd use peat smoke. So you'd make a nice smoky peat fire underneath it. You'd keep your your lower level peat for heating your house and cooking your dinner. So you'd use sort of slightly easier to get at, need quite a big quantity of it, smoky peat from higher up to dry your barley. And you basically have a nice flat layer of barley on a kind of nice wooden holy surface, and the fire underneath it. So you're not setting fire to it, but just the smoke is rising and drying it. And obviously the phenols are sticking to the wet barley at the same time. And that smoky flavor will carry on all through the rest of your production processes and end up being a smoky whiskey. Okay. So for our first whiskey, it might be a bit of a surprise that we are not staying in Scotland. We are going to jump over to India and taste a peated single malt whiskey from India. Now, just to soften the surprise, they actually don't have much peaty malted barley made in India. They do have peat in India. You have peat in 90% of the world's countries. But all you need is a boggy field. There's plenty of those in almost every country in the world. But of course, each kind of country's peat will be made from the local plants, and those might behave differently when you burn them. And the peat they've found so far in India doesn't taste so nice when you're burning it. So what Amrit do, and they're a distillery that was set up in 1948, the year after India became independent from the British. And they wanted to make whiskey, loved whiskey so much, wanted to make whiskey immediately. So started making whiskey, wanted to make peaty whiskey because they liked that style of whiskey and realized they couldn't get peaty malted barley in India. So decided to ship it over from Scotland. So having just given you a bit of a shock about where we're going, this is actually Scottish peat here with European barley, peated to around 30 to 35 ppm. Now, ppm is a measurement you might have heard people in whiskey talk about when talking about smokiness. The phenols I introduced you to earlier, that's what this is measuring. So it's phenols parts per million. So in the barley, how many parts per million of the molecules are phenols? Now, there's a variety of different kind of scales here, but usually sort of, obviously 0 is unpeated, 5, 6, 7 is lightly peated, 15 around is medium peated, and around 30, 40 is heavily peated. Obviously, there are whiskies now in modern times that have come out in, a few hundreds. Certain distilleries have really gone for kind of extremely crazy heavy peat levels. But classically, around 40 ppm would have been big, solid Islay, your big Islay distilleries going for, extremely smoky. So 40 parts per million is tiny, but our palate, our nose really, really picks up just that even small quantity of phenols. Okay, so this would be, like I say, 30 to 35. So good, solid peaty level. They make the whiskey very much in a classic style over here in Bangalore. Obviously, the climate is a bit different. It's much, much warmer. This is tropical. So the whiskey ages 3 to 4 times faster than it would do here. This is actually a 4.5-year-old whiskey aged in ex-bourbon barrels predominantly. It's 46% as well, so a little bit stronger than the last thing we had. And of course, it is going to taste different to the Illegal that we just tasted because it's made from barley and it's aged. But if you focus on the smoke and the sort of style of the smoke and the sort of the smokiness that we talked about with the Illegal, then hopefully you will see it's a little bit similar. And for me, this, when me and Gaby first sort of came up with this tasting, we hadn't really thought of doing them in pairs, and hopefully it will make more sense as we carry on through the pairs, because we just thought we'd compare some whiskies and compare some mezcals, and we thought we'd have to do all the mezcals first because they were all unaged. We have to do all the whiskies at the end because they were all aged, and that would be it. And then we started tasting them, and Gaby, you were tasting whiskies and going, hey, this reminds me of this mezcal, and I was tasting mezcals going, hey, this reminds me of this one of my whiskies. And suddenly we realized that there were different families of smoke. And like I say, that's sort of tied in with our research on smoke. So for us, this is kind of what we call introduction to smoke. This is default smoke. It's a bit ashy. It's a bit sweet. It's kind of, what you call classic barbecue smoke almost, if that makes sense. Hannah, how are you finding the difference? You're the one who's got all the samples tonight. Me and Gabby are.
So when you first smell this one, the Amrit, you really get like the smoke, and you get that really quite sweet, like vanilla-y sort of style smoke. If you go back to the mezcal, then that smells really fruity. The fruit comes out. I went back to the Amrit, tasted it, and where I'd expect the mezcal to taste more fruity, it was the Amrit that had the real like bright fruit on it. Quite an interesting smoke, quite like charcoaly. I was trying to think what it was, and it's almost like slightly like piney and resinous.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the illegal and taste it, you then get more of that kind of, I found I got more of those woody notes that the, like you were saying about the pine, Gabby, and that, you know, the kind of like wood fire, things like that. So you can see how they pair together. They're quite different. They are quite different drams, you know, different drinks. And if you taste them separately, they're very different on their own. But when you actually taste them side by side, as you say, when you focus on the smoke of it, the smoke is quite similar. They've got that lovely, quite sweet, quite pared back sort of style smoke that's quite woody.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's the thing. Like I say, this is, you know, a bit of a stretch maybe for some people's palates. It's quite a sort of thing that we're asking you to do, is to ignore all the flavors that come from the raw material and some of the aging, and just focus on the smoke. Of course, do appreciate the spirits as they are as a whole, as well. But just for the purposes of tiny little sections of this, hopefully you can feel. I think for me as well, it's, you know, how much of the total flavor, how much does the smoke take up of it? And they both again feel quite similar. Yeah. So Amrit feels like it's got obviously a lot more oaky flavors happening in it, slightly less of the raw material, and the smokiness takes up about this much. Illegal's got a lot of flavors of agave in there, and then the smokiness takes up about the same proportion. It's really interesting to feel where they are in the palate and how it works.
So considering you said that this is, you know, what was about 30 to 35 ppm, and that is classed on the heavier peated side, and peat feels quite light on it. It feels really quite. It's a type of whiskey that if you were, you know, really into sort of peaty whiskies, that you could drink in the summertime and not feel like it's really kind of wintry and warming. It's really quite a light sort of style, a bit like the Illegal, where it's just got that nice, that almost kind of like breath of it in the background coming through, not to kind of overpower it. And it's not the main thing in there. It's not going, hey, we're all about peat in this, or smoke. It's quite pared back. So yeah.
Yeah, Gabby, you usually say about you know, illegal mezcal producers not wanting to be too smoky, right?
No, many people actually believe that too much smoke is an accident. Is something of a problem. You might be able to hide mistakes that you have done during fermentation or distillation. I mean, in production, really. In fact, for illegal, they really believe on while they're doing the process, is they finish crushing and fermenting, they will never be cooking at the same time as distilling, because they believe that even there could be a cross contamination, and then sort of, I don't know if this is where we can talk about like how alcohol really absorbs also smoke while it's already made into a spirit. So it will be a totally different approach of a spirit if it absorbs the smoke rather than it's being produced while it's being cooked and everything, it absorbs the smoke. It will be totally different. You can notice in cocktails nowadays it's very popular to smoke a cocktail and everything. Well, it will never ever be the same as to do a peaty whiskey from the very beginning or cooking an agave in the pit fire.
Yeah, good point, Gabby. I mean, I think the smoke you sometimes get from the sort of the smoking guns and stuff is quite often quite acrid, quite harsh. And you know, alcohol loves picking up flavors, as we all know, and phenols love attaching themselves to things. So as we all, you know, if you've ever been to a bonfire and smelled your clothes of your hair the following day, that's what's happening. Phenols love sticking to stuff. So yeah, and I think obviously with whiskey, you know, again, you know, the smoky flavor they want to be there. That's you know, while it was an accident initially, it's very much a purposeful choice now. But of course, the flavor from the casks that's kind of overlapping all the flavors of the smoke from the raw material, of course, you know, is going to have a big impact on the flavor. I think a lot of people don't realize when you're talking about phenols, or ppm in whiskies, you're usually talking about the amount that's in the barley at the beginning. Now, every decision you make of producing your whiskey, you know, what type of yeast strain you're using, how long you ferment for, your settings on your stills, every decision of what type of cask you're aging in, how long for, etc., will cause phenols to dissipate, to disappear. So, and different distilleries do make different decisions for each of those steps. So you can have a whiskey that's 30 ppm at the beginning, and two of them are made, you know, from the same barley, but they end up tasting completely different because of a variety of different choices in the production process. So it's a really interesting thing. It's almost useless, you know, knowing the ppm of the barley. It's a nice thing that whiskey geeks like to know. But really, we should be measuring the ppm of the liquid at the end when we're tasting it. And no one does that because that's what people don't.
Much work.
It's a bit more expensive. Yeah, they have to do some more analysis.
Too much effort.
Exactly, but you know, we should, and that would make things a lot clearer, I think, for a lot of people. But yeah, so I think, you know, that the flavor of the cask here is going to be sort of flattening down. And of course, tropically aged whiskey, you're going to get that fruity notes that you've sort of mentioned, and you're going to get a lot more flavor more quickly coming from that cask. Hopefully everyone's okay with the first pair. Just and here's a nice picture of the distillery. So I've not talked too much about how the whiskey is made, but very, very traditional in style. They've got their own cooperage. And here are some tasting notes as well. Sorry, we've kind of...
I was going to say, I really get banana on the Amaret.
Yeah, tropical whiskies. Always going to get tropical.
Quite interesting because then the Illegal also is quite like fruity and tropical. But yeah.
But different tropical, no? Different tropics.
Yeah. It's super interesting once you start putting them next to each other. I think they're really, you know, and you'd never imagine them kind of being friends, and then suddenly,
but then they are.
It's good. Okay, good. I'm glad that's working. So we're now gonna move into our next pair. Hopefully everyone's gonna understand. It will start making a bit more sense once we, I think, taste the second pair. So Gaby, do you want to tell us a bit about the Rumbes?
Sure. The bottle that beautiful Hannah is showing us is the bottle, the style of the expression of the Rumbes mezcal that we're tasting today. Is like a dark green because each bottle of the Rumbes represents different states. I'll explain a little bit further, but basically the Rumbes is a collection of mezcales from 6 out of the 9 different states of Mexico that are part of the denomination of origin. So here is a clear example of how really mezcal it is, as in so many ways, no? So the people that you see in the picture are some of the loveliest people that I've ever met. Is Esteban Morales and Sergio Mendoza. They are super passionate about Mexico. They are Mexicans themselves. I always say that they're very young because they are my age. So yes, very young. And they travel around Mexico, meeting these beautiful people who have been making mezcal for generation through generation, meet the people who make these mezcales, and then get together in business. Now, this is different to what it was illegal in this case. We didn't really did a contract. What we did is really work with the people. In this case, Esteban approach. In your case of the mezcal that we're tasting today is Jose Guadalupe. And this family, Bañuelos is the last name, this family have been making mezcal for many generations. They own very vast amount of terrain in northern part of Jalisco, but in this case it's already another state called Zacatecas. Funny enough, do you remember when I mentioned tequila, how different it is, blue agave, and the volcano exploding? Well, the volcano exploded, and obviously it has no limits. And it arrived all the way to Zacatecas. And Zacatecas as a state is very close to Jalisco. It's not part of the denomination of tequila. And it also has naturally blue agaves. So many people before the denomination of origin of mezcal was done, because it was 20 years after tequila, they were producing mezcales using the same methods of tequila, but using blue agave, just to sort of follow the fashion, thinking perhaps eventually we will be part of the denomination or something like that. However, this family, the Bañuelos family, didn't want to change their process. They did want to keep their own ways of producing mezcal, which is ancestral and more like artisanal, sorry. But they start to implement different technologies. So rather than just dig a hole for the earthen oven, they actually dig a hole, but then they did a sort of a cylindrical earthen oven, let's say lined with bricks. That will help us to contain more the heat inside of the oven. You need less wood, and the agaves get cooked evenly, time-wise and all. So yeah, they just start to do different style of, let's say, technology again. They cook the agaves on that brick oven under the ground with fire. Then they crush it with a tajona. They ferment it naturally, and they distill twice in copper alembic. Now, what you have is a beautiful style of mezcal from, as I mentioned, the state of Zacatecas, which is right in the center where the arrow is. And Zacatecas is super important state of Mexico, is where the mines of gold and silver were and are still, and where the Europeans settled. So, well, long story short, let's go for the style of mezcal that you are trying. For me, is again, I mean, all the derrumbes collection are so out of the box. So none, even though the one from Oaxaca is from Oaxaca, and we mentioned mostly all the mezcales that you will taste in the UK are from Oaxaca. Oaxaca uses two different styles of agaves. That's the one right in the bottom, in red color. Then we have another one in gray color, and that is from another state called Michoacan. They use two different kind of agaves, and they use different processes. The yellow one is in the northern part of Mexico, where we have the denomination. The style of mezcal is beautiful, elegant, weird, wonderful. But the one that you're tasting right now, for me, the smoke is this proper meaty barbecue in every sense of the word. So not only about barbecue as a barbecue sauce, also barbecue as a meat, like when you are cooking meat. It is pretty strong. To be honest, the batches are different. This is artisanal mezcal. We don't add any water after it's still, so it's still strength, but we don't go to high ABV. What is the ABV that you have over there, Hannah?
We've got 46.5.
46.5, yeah.
It is lot number 6.
There you go. So these expressions, or this brand of the rumbes, is like vintage wine. Every time might be slightly different. And this is, again, because of the season. We never try to adjust it to keep it the same. On the contrary, we embraced all those variances that weather conditions give us and nature give us in reality. So sometimes this might be slightly stronger, and the notes of smoke will come lighter. In this case, the blue agave is predominant, is stronger, is high, but then again, the meaty notes all around are just something delicious.
I think this company is incredible, isn't it, Gabby? I mean, these guys are basically doing what my dream holiday is, isn't it? For them, it's job. For me, my dream holiday is to visit all these different states of Mexico and visit these tiny little artisanal producers who've been producing mezcal for generations, and see what they're doing, taste what they're doing, and I'd be delighted. This would be amazing.
Yeah,
it just incredible.
You really like it, Hannah? See, so, to be honest, what I'm doing right now as ambassador to these brands, this is actually my dream job. But to travel around the world, to travel around Mexico, meeting these people, and obviously working with them, because it's not about cooperative, but in reality they are working together, no? So basically, Sergio and Esteban go meet the people and start to work together. They always are very loyal to the people who they work with, and they buy the mezcal from them. They paid good money, so they never ask to make more and to make it cheaper. and they don't change it at all. So basically, they buy it, they take it to their laboratory. Let's call it that way because that's how it should be in reality. So basically, a little laboratory where we have to filter the mezcal out of for any particles of dust. Really, it's not a normal filtration. And then we have to ask permission to the government to give us the green light that the liquid is good. Then we bottle it and send it to the world. And again, it's untouched. It's something that what you're drinking right now in your glass is something that the people in Zacatecas in that area are drinking. Again, beautiful.
It's just amazing. Imagine, you're invited to a wedding or a party or something in a tiny little remote area of Mexico. And imagine this is what's given to you. And you'd be like, where is this? What's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is incredible.
So again, we use blue agave. I don't know if I mentioned it properly. So this is blue agave, mezcal. So mezcal can use blue agave, but tequila cannot use any other agave that is not blue.
The thing with this one, like you're saying, this like the smoke has definitely got that meatiness, but that quite like a barbecue meat, that sort of sweet sort of smell of it. But to me, it also smells quite creamy, and like when you taste it as well, it's got that it tastes like a sort of sweet chili smell, and like it's really like layered and complex. I just think it smells amazing. It's got a very earthy kind of like profile to it as well. Yeah,
it's a herbaceousness there, I think, as well.
It was very funny that one of our colleagues accompanied me to Mexico to do a trip and to visit the producers. We met one of the producers, basically the son of the producer, so he's also a producer with them. And then he actually introduced himself, and he like, "Excuse me, I'm very sorry, my English is very bad." And then he was speaking, and I was like, "Oh my God, his English is better than me, no?" And then we were like, that was the joke, no? Like his English was very bad, but he spoke better than Gaby. Has years living in London. But super cool people, really.
It's amazing. So yeah, I mean, I think exploring this Derrumbes range is fantastic, and we've included different ones of these in different smoke sessions. So the Michoacan is one we use quite often, the Oaxaca. Really, really interesting. But this is a super unusual one, and I think, I mean, how many mezcals are made from blue agave, Gaby? Not too many, right?
Not many. I mean, I haven't seen them. Actually, these might be the second or third I've seen in the market in the UK. Perhaps there are more for sure, but yeah, not many. In the UK, I'll say two.
And that bit of the green area that's poking down, that's into Jalisco, right? That's into tequila zone.
No. The color is the state, and Jalisco or Tequila Town is right underneath of that, around there. Exactly.
Yeah. But if you're thinking of, they're growing blue agaves there, it's not too much of a stretch for them to grow them here. Right?
And the funny part is what divides us in between Zacatecas and Jalisco is a huge, how do we call it? We call it in Spanish barranca. It's like a cliff. And so to get there from Tequila, you could easily cross, direct, but you cannot because there is this cliff. So you have to go around. For several hours, unless you want to hike and everything and arrive there. But it's so weird, no? How nature also divides us.
Yeah, it's crazy. Oh, super interesting. Thanks, Gaby. So compare with this one, we are going to go now maybe somewhere that's maybe a bit more familiar to the whiskey drinkers. We are going to taste the elements of Islay Peat. And it is actually a blended malt, so it is should start from the beginning. Elements of Islay is an independent bottler of Islay whiskies, and one of the kind of biggest collections of casks of Islay whiskies. That if they, considering they don't have a distillery, they are building one at the moment. But they had this range, Elements of Islay, for quite a few years, just bottling up casks of single malts from Islay, from any of those distilleries that you see on the map there. if they taste sort of super unusual or quite weird or really, really kind of unlike their kind of classic flavors from the distillery. So, for example, Kalila, usually bottled to taste specifically like this, even though they've made a lot more flavors than that. And the vast majority of Kalila is obviously sent off for blending. So these guys would get hold of casks from Kalila and be like, cool, this one doesn't taste anything like a kind of regular Kalila bottling, so let's bottle it. Or if it did taste a little bit similar during the aging process, they'd be like, let's put it in a weird cask and see what happens. But then they also sort of started looking into what they love about Islay whiskies and what they love about the specific things coming from the island. And obviously quite a lot of that is peat, and it is this peat smoke that we've been talking about. And so they decided that they wanted to sort of bottle almost a representation of what peat tastes like. And the interesting thing when you're talking about Islay whiskies, if you get quite geeky into them, is the distilleries on the south usually say are more coastal and more kind of seaweedy or briny, heading into TCP, some of them. Whereas the peaty ones coming from the north of the island are usually much more herbaceous and fruity, floral, those kind of flavors. And so they were kind of like, well, how can you talk about peat? How can you try and make a whiskey that represents peat by just showing one or the other side of peat? So what they decided to do is blend some whiskey from the north, some single malts from the north of Islay, with some single malts from the south of Islay. So that's why it's a blended malt. So it can't be called a single malt because it's more than one distillery. But obviously the whole point was to try and almost give like a 3D image of peat rather than everyone else. When you're drinking single malts, you're just looking at one side of peat. And that's kind of what this whiskey is all about. So it's bottled at 45% ABV. And it's young. It is about kind of 7-8 years old. But that's kind of the point when you're looking at peatiness. Like I said before, the longer you age something, the more those phenols will disappear. So if you're really, really into smoky whiskey, but you also get a little bit bogged down about age statements, you're maybe wasting your time sometimes, because the older a whiskey you get, it will become less and less peaty as time goes on. So if you want something really peaty, really vibrant, really zingy, really aromatic, it's best to have a young peaty whiskey. And I think that's what this one does absolutely perfectly.
I tried this a while ago with you, Stef, and ever since I really, really enjoyed it because it's so bright and vibrant. And again, though, the peat on it, thinking back to the Durumbas, it's got that meaty kind of sweet barbecue sort of style of peat. Quite different in the kind of flavor profile in the sort of mid and the beginning and the mid of the palate, but the smoke in there, the lingering smoke, is similar on them. But yeah, I think is a lovely, quite a tropical style whiskey, considering it's from Islay.
Yeah, that's where it's coming from, exactly. Yeah. I think we did talk about that first pair having slightly barbecuey flavors. For me, they're a bit more ashy, like distant fire. Yeah. Whereas this, for me, gets much more meaty barbecue for both of these. And obviously, this whiskey does have some of the herbaceous notes in it as well, as the kind of slightly coastal notes. But quite.
I'm going to say, I think the thing with the Amrit that perhaps throws you off slightly is that because it's got quite a bit of oak influence, you can smell the vanilla in it, so it makes it seem like the smoke quite sweet. But it got that really it's the charcoal note that kind of really comes through on it. And then when you compare it now to this, that's definitely more like meaty barbecue, sweeter than the smoke on that.
Yeah. So absolutely stunning whiskey. And I think the great thing about these guys, obviously, is their access to incredible casks, not being tied to a specific distillery style, and their kind of just love, adoration of everything to do with Islay. And I think, this peat's never really been thought of in this way. A lot of people try and make the peatiest whiskey ever, or try and do this kind of thing, whereas I think trying to sort of find all your different kind of sides of peat, highlight it in every direction, is a really delicious and lovely way of looking at it, trying to get all the types of phenols in there.
Yeah. Really like.
I think also as well, you know, a lot of people are single malt snobs out there, and they pay, you pay 20 quid for the word single on your single malt. So if it's not a single malt, you can get a ton of flavour for an absolute bargain.
I think sometimes what people don't always realize as well, unless you actually buy a single cask whiskey, all your whiskey is blended to some extent, because it's a blend of different casks from the distillery. And, there's nothing to say that just because it's a 12-year-old whiskey, that all of the whiskey in there is 12 years old. It's their average age. And, blending.
It's the youngest age.
Yes. Yeah. The youngest age. But blending is an art. It's an art form that, to get the right blend of something, it takes a lot of time. It takes, people are employed as the chief nosers to make sure they get the right blend.
Right flavour profile. And I think people don't maybe realise the diversity of casks coming from a single distillery as well. I think, even if they're all the same type of cask, you get a decent amount of variety of flavour coming in. And like I say, the people, who've decided that specific distillery should taste of this specific flavour are completely ignoring all these other flavours that distillery is capable of making and that naturally occur in their warehouse. So really, really interesting here to taste just such a delicious, solidly peaty, unashamedly going for it whiskey, but still with other flavours, smoothness. It's a lovely one.
Yeah, and for the price point as well, I think it's about £30 retail, this one, which is great, because most Islay whiskies, they start at that kind of 40, 45, 50 sort of price point, where this is a fantastic whiskey for 30 quid. I really like this. Yeah,
it's bonkers. And I'm glad you're getting the kind of the peatiness and the way the smoke flavour sort of links up with that delicious Durambez as well. It's a really lovely little unusual pairing, I think. And we can't go too peaty today. We have gotten solidly peaty, but we can't go crazily peaty today, because if we're pairing them with the mezcals, as Gaby said earlier, that none of the mezcals want to be too smoky. They want to keep that balance. So I think we're showing really balanced whiskies as well.
I don't know what my favourite is yet so far,
though. Well, hold on. Don't choose yet. So we're going to move now into our third and final pair. And hopefully the pairs are starting to make a bit more sense. This one, I think, really is where it sort of cements it. And we're actually going to jump over to Japan and talk a little bit about Nika. So this is Kaketsuru. He's the father of Japanese whiskey, and the guy who came over to Scotland in 1918, learned how to make whiskey, met and married a Scottish lady, and moved back to Japan. And he built the first Japanese whiskey distilleries, firstly for someone else, and then built some for himself as well. And the whiskey that we're going to taste, this is him arriving in the UK. Oh, sorry, wrong place. This is the distillery that we want to talk about now. So he built this distillery in 1934, and actually this is on the north west coast of Japan, so the northern island of Hokkaido, right on the left-hand side. And it's an estuary where the river meets the sea, which you can see just here. The sea is sort of the one facing towards Russia. And those red-roofed buildings are the distillery. So the whiskey made here is made, again, very traditionally Scottish in style, obviously, though in Japan, and using peaty barley of a few different levels. So here in Japan, they don't do like quite a lot of the Scottish distilleries do and have a single peat level that they always make whiskey from. Here you'll make unpeated whiskey, lightly peated whiskey, medium and heavily peated whiskey. But the main point is that it's all made and aged next to the sea. And while Gaby's been talking about, where you grow agaves, it has to happen for 8+ years. And those flavors that are developed during that time have a lot to do with the place in which they are grown. With whiskey, it's actually quite often much more about the production process, but of course also where you're aging. So these casks have sat here with the sea breeze for 10+ years. and have a little hint of saltiness coming in them. So we're going to now be focusing on coastal smoke. So we've done kind of ashy, classic smoke, let's say. Then we've done more barbecue-y, meaty smoke. And now we're going to do some more coastal smoke focus. So this is a 10 to 12-year-old kind of average age whiskey. There's no age statement on it. But all made at this Yoichi distillery here in Japan and aged here as well. And a lot of your Scottish single malts, unfortunately, are quite often not aged where they're made. They're moved into sort of cheaper, uglier areas of Scotland. Big warehouses are built and put there. So here you're really getting all that kind of, like I say, coastal stuff coming from here. And this is a picture of the distillery in the winter, where it's very nice. So 45% ABV and aged in a variety of different cask types. We do have a little bit of sherry cask here, but majority is ex-bourbon. And like I say, a few different phenol levels, ppm levels in the barley, but it would take us to a kind of medium high level is probably the zone that we'll end up in. And here are some tasting notes.
Seaweed, yeah.
Yeah. Beach bonfire is a good one.
Yeah, I think there is a different flavor compared to a different bonfire.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing now that I've started looking into smoke. I'll walk into a cottage and be like, okay, bonfire here, or you walk up to, like a bonfire pit, this time of year as well, of course, going up kind of a place where people are having an outside bonfire. It smells completely different. A barbecue, distant barbecue, a fire pit, they all smell so different, and it's just starting to kind of collect these flavors and get a beach fire as always have a very specific flavor profile, but also licorice has that hint of saltiness to it as well. So yeah, hopefully people are getting some. Obviously there are other flavors, not just from the peatiness here. Of course, that aging is having an impact. There'll be cask in here as well, of course, and barley notes.
Yeah, it's really nice and earthy, but the smoke is very like delicate and it kind of lingers like round your mouth where if you had wine you'd usually feel like the tannins. Like I can feel it round my gums, like it lingers and just it's very, very kind of delicate, very slightly kind of floral almost as well. And definitely fresh, definitely like you're at the beach and it's a cold day, or like you're walking down the seafront and you get that cold air in your mouth. And this, I think, is definitely, I'd say, less peaty, less smoky than the last one. A bit more elegant. The Japanese prefer their smoky whiskies to be a bit more elegant as well. But I also think that, say when you're making food, the addition of salt or any kind of salty thing will help enhance all the flavors and make them all feel a bit more solid and rounded as well. So I think that's what happens a wee bit here. And then we're going to compare this to, it's a new category, Gaby.
Yes. So remember I told you Mexico has, the two most famous denominations are tequila and mezcal. In reality, we have many other denominations. Some of those are part of the agave family. They simply were not part of certain denomination and they made their own. In this case, what you're tasting right now is raicilla, the bottle that beautiful Hannah is showing us as well. It is a brand called La Venenosa. We translate to poisonous. Don't worry, it's not poisonous. It's just a sort of a sarcastic name in reality. But what is raicilla in reality? It is a mezcal by definition because it follows every single bit of the mezcal denomination. But we are not part of the denomination as in territory, so we cannot call ourselves mezcal. So many people fought for a new denomination, and the denomination took a name from ancient times, or more than ancient times, from around 1500s. basically we were already a Spanish colony, and the Europeans were drinking a lot. We know anyway, Europeans were drinking a lot, brandy, wine, they came from all over Europe and everything, but eventually they realized that they could also bring their sugar cane and grapes and produce wines and brandies and rum distillates in Mexico. But also they realized that we are already full of mezcales, or of agaves, and we were making mezcales. So they also brought a way of distillation, which is the Arabic, but still they began making a lot of mezcal in Mexico, and they fall in love with it. Eventually, the kings of Spain, who sponsored all those people to come to Mexico, to the new continent, to invade, they noticed that their troops were not drinking any more spirits coming all the way from Europe, so they were losing money there. And they sent to kill anybody who was producing any spirit, and whoever was producing anything, everything got totally destroyed. What's happened is apparently some people who were very clever in Mexico, they were particularly people who live very far away out of the main cities. They were producing mezcales to drink for themselves and everything, not necessarily for production for the troops. And apparently they were also making medicines, and these medicines were, I don't know, a distillation of certain alcohol, adding certain roots and certain herbs. They call it raicilla, comes from the word root in Spanish. They used to call it raicilla. So apparently when the troops of Spain went to check who the hell was making spirits, they realized that these people were making something, and they asked, "What are you doing?" And apparently everybody was saying, "No, we're making raicilla," just to sort of evade to get killed or to get their production destroyed. Well, the long story short is apparently they managed to escape. They were never found out. Nobody ever found out that they were making mezcal. That was particularly in the state of Jalisco. And once eventually tequila got popular, eventually mezcal, everybody got their denomination. Mezcal didn't allow Jalisco be part of the denomination of mezcal. And Jalisco, the state, were saying, okay, we are more than tequila, we have mezcales. And if you don't allow us to call mezcal to our product, we will fight for a new denomination. And they remembered all those many years ago, they used to call themselves raicilla. They thought this is the way. So nowadays we have raicilla, a new denomination just granted in 2018. It's not perfect. There are so many things that we need to adjust, but it's a new denomination. Again, it's a mezcal by definition, not by denomination. It is a beautiful style. So do you remember what I mentioned about the rumbes, that it is a collection of mezcales from different states of Mexico? In this case, La Venenosa is a collection of raicillas from the south part of Jalisco State. And Jalisco State is pretty big. It's almost the size of the whole of England, Wales, and a little bit of Scotland. So pretty big. We have the second biggest varieties of agave, so we have plenty to play. And the person that you see in the picture is lovely Esteban Morales, which is the same part owner of the Rumbers. As I mentioned, super proud of Mexico, and he goes travel. He does beautiful things with these people. In some cases, he have found certain distillates made in Jalisco that were almost going to be extinct. He approached the people and, "What are you doing? Why you don't make this anymore?" And apparently the people reply, "Well, it's not the point. We are not making money, and we have to go to work in the city." And he's like, no, please stay, bring your people back, let's do it. So he's doing beautiful things. And in the UK we have 4 out of their, I think, 7 or 8 different expressions. I think he have even more, some limited edition. We have the one that you see in the picture, the red, the green, the sort of deep or dark blue, and the black one. And the one that you're trying right now is the green. And this is something that we need to talk a lot. It's so delicious. Now, Hannah, what is the ABV on that?
This one is 44.3.
Same as mine, so same batch might be. So now please try it and let's talk about it. But in the meantime, I'm gonna explain you the production, and you won't believe how much effort is to make this beautiful little brand. So basically, we have the producer. In this case, is Mr. Don Beto. Don Beto goes and harvests the agaves. Usually, the agaves are either from a neighbor or the government grant them a permission to harvest certain areas of their area for production of mezcal. In this case, he harvests an agave called Chico Aguiar, or in a biological biological name is Rodacanta. He harvests the agaves. You can see it is huge. He does the whole process himself. He cooks the agave rather than under the ground. It's exactly the same method, but above ground. So like a pizza oven sort of thing. So first you have the oven up sort of above ground. You put the fire, you put rocks on top, and then from above the oven, let's say it's like a igloo, you start to drop the agaves on top of the oven. The oven then gets totally locked. The agaves get cooked. He doesn't have any tahona or wood chipper to crush the agave. He actually used a mallet, so properly handmade. And then he does a distillation, which is the bigger picture that you see over there. We use Filipino style of distillation. The pot still is made by the trunk of a tree that is very easy to hollow. We have direct fire. The dead moss with some fibers are put into a sort of copper case or copper pan inside of the pot still. Then it starts to evaporate, it then condense, it comes out, and we do the same method all over again. So it has to be distilled twice. Again, it's untouched. We didn't add any water after distillation. It is beautiful, but here we need to really speak about the style of smoke. The whole process is part of the flavors. Each flavor will really bring you a lot of coastal notes, as the previous whiskey that we tried. This is a picture, not necessarily of the actual place, because it's in El Tuito, which is a very far away or very sort of hidden place in the state of Jalisco. But the picture is actually from around the area. So again, not necessarily Don Beto is there when you see the bay, but that's a picture of that area. It is very close to Puerto Vallarta. If anybody has been in Mexico, Puerto Vallarta is a very popular destination to go to the beach, really. We use agave rodacanta. It's made in Jalisco, and there is the little map. Now, the flavor profile for me, I love what Steph already puts. Yeah, olive, green leaves, orchard, farmyard, mint, lemon, aniseed, parmesan, spicy ginger, mineral pesto, gravel, and rubber tires. Yes, it's true, all of them. I actually added all of them. Let me see. I put salty. I also find certain tropical notes such as mango. Oregano. You already put pesto. I also find cheese, and in this case it's parmesan. So no, it's so complex. It's so amazing. I have tried drinks made with this, and you won't believe it. I tried one drink made by a lovely, lovely guy, and it was like, do you have in mind the classic drink made by Audrey Sonder called Clover Club, which is basically gin sour with raspberry syrup. In this case, I tried with this expression of La Venenosa. It was amazing. I mean, this is the versatility. This is how really we need to think out of the box when we talk about agave spirits or many other drinks. Now, the smoky notes, notice the smoky notes really are giving us so much. No, the woody note is almost comfortable. No, like again, I'll go from what you say about the Japanese whiskey. I also find a little bit of seaweed and a little bit of a beach. How do you say? Beach bonfire. Yeah, there is something comforting about this wood. And also, let's think about it. The wood also behaves differently because also the distillation happened in wood again. So the wood have contact direct with fire. So again, over there we might get a lot of other notes from from combustion, definitely. So
I think the interesting thing about this as well, again, if people are kind of used to whiskies but maybe not used to agave spirits, is this kind of pesto, olives, kind of savory note that people might be like, is this okay? Is this fine? And I think maybe people aren't used to kind of, because it's wild fermentation, isn't it? And I think that's the thing that super long fermentations as well, that giving you tons and tons of kind of complexity and texture.
Yeah. So during lockdown, Stef and me and the team was trying to learn a little bit about all that fermentation. What else it give us? We know that it's super important. Actually, fermentation, we believe, or many people believe, that is one of the main kind of elements where we get more personality in the spirit. And obviously over here we can show it, no? In agave spirits, we have very long fermentation. Sometimes, as I mentioned, it can last even 15 days. And while the wild fermentation is happening, you also have other bacteria joining the party and giving us other flavors. So you have a lot of lactics, malolactics, and then you have acetones and petroleum notes, and where that's the rubber tires. You have so much, and then obviously, together with the smoky notes and the way of distillation and the flavor of the agave, the way that the master distiller or maestro mezcalero have done it is just amazing.
Yeah. And actually, I forget with Hannah and potentially the Starmore Boss kind of customers, we are maybe speaking to wine people. So this kind of natural fermentation and some of these things might not be quite as scary as they are to whiskey people.
I mean, this when you first smell it is like, what is going on here? Because it smells almost like blue cheese, and you get that sort of smoky, creamy sort of smell with certain blue cheeses and things like that. Yeah. But I found that once I swirled it, and once that, because what you tend to find as well with like natural wines is sometimes you get that farmyard smell, and if once that's kind of blown off, you'll tend to get those smells like underneath, the other flavors coming through underneath it. And this reminds me really, it sounds really bizarre, but there's a spirit range that we stock called Empirical, which can't really be defined and are a bit mad. And they do one called the Plum, I suppose, and they use plum kernel, like the actual seeds of the inside of the plum in the distillation. And it reminds me of that. It has that very kind of clean but fruit-driven kind of core on it. But then you get all these other flavors surrounding that almost. And that kind of saltiness, the brininess that you get with like the kind of olive. And then sometimes you get the little hints of like cheese coming through, but it's a more salty kind of cheese.
For me, now that you mentioned the blue cheese, it's like Stilton cheese. I used to work in a bar and we used to serve Stilton cheese. Yeah. So creamy, salty.
They don't do that anymore, Gabby. I went back not that long ago.
Oh no, I'm going on Sunday, so yeah. What a shame.
But in comparison with the Nika as well, you get it's a delicate sort of smoke again, and I actually think the smoke's quite, you were saying the smoke on the Nika is quite herbaceous, but it's quite herbaceous on this and almost slightly floral, I think, as well.
Yeah, and I think with the Nika, obviously, it's not got the cheesy notes coming through, but it's got this oiliness. The Nika was coal. The stills are coal-fired, so kind of like with Gabby's rustic still here for this one. Is the most rustic type of still you can find in whiskey, and you are going to get the wash burning onto the bottom of the still, and that kind of extra it's called the Mayard reaction, the same thing that happens when you sort of brown a steak or make delicious food basically, and it really gives you an extra kind of complexity of texture as well. So I think that's something that's sort of similar between the both of them.
Yeah.
So delicious, no?
Oh, really good. So I remember the first time I tried this, though, I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
What the hell is that?
The cheese on it, but like now trying it again, actually, that you can get past that quite quickly, and there's so much in it.
But who doesn't love Stilton? I mean, and also it's coming up to Christmas. Like you could have Stilton after your dinner, or you could have some of this.
Yes, aperitivo with your.
You could have some of this and some Stilton.
I know, right?
Maybe that might be too much, but
there's no such thing as too much Stilton. But yeah, I think it's, it's a nice little journey of flavors. And like I say, while at the beginning, maybe the links of the smokes might seem a bit tenuous, I think they do all start coming together once you try through a few pairs.
It's an interesting way to taste them as well, because it makes you actually analyze what the smoky part of it is. Because I think sometimes people go, particularly with whiskey, and perhaps not so much with mezcal, but they're very much like, yes, I like a smoky whiskey. And like you were saying about Isla earlier, you get different styles of smoke depending on where you are. And what this has proven is there's different styles of smoke within that, in that kind of category. And there's some smokes that are very delicate, very light, some that are much heavier and richer. And it's kind of making you realize actually what type of smoke, what type of kind of flavors is it that you like out of that. As opposed to just being like, I like smoke, something that's smoky.
And like I say, it was an accident. We'd prepared to taste a couple of mezcals and then taste a couple of whiskeys in a tasting, and sort of both have half a section each type of thing, and that would be our presentation. And then suddenly we were like, oh my goodness, these taste amazing together.
So much too. And actually we play around as well as what you try today. We sometimes also change it for other expressions, so people get to try them all as well. And then there is so much whiskey world, and there is so much style of mezcal as well, or agave spirits, that it's fair. It's only fair to keep changing them and updating them and all.
And the other thing that's good to do as well is not only is it taste it in pairs, but it means you taste them vertically as well. And going back to having the kind of different pairs, but then taking the mezcals from that and then going from each of them and tasting them separately next to each other, and then tasting the whiskeys in the same way, and then kind of tasting them as pairs, it really makes you think about what you're actually tasting. And kind of really sort of learn to separate different sort of styles in it.
Exactly. And then also, I don't know, what was the ABV of the last the Japanese whiskey we tried today?
45.
45. So we were usually we play around as well, and we realized that the mezcales are often lower ABV than the whiskeys, when everybody expects the agave spirits to be higher and punchier and like stronger in reality. But no, today we tried Zacatecas, which was, we said, 47, and that will be the highest that we tried today.
46 and a half. So,
46.
It's still perfectly smooth. And I think, that's the thing a lot of people think in whiskey, it's the aging that makes things smooth. And aging will smooth off a rough spirit, but if you're making a top quality spirit in the first place, aging doesn't need to do that. Aging can just add a few oaky notes and round it. So, sort of showcase perfect by these mezcals today, all unaged, all incredible. Don't need any cask.
No, I think I don't think I can choose a favorite.
Come on, you have to.
Oh.
No, you don't have to. That's too mean.
I mean, I didn't try the whiskeys. I love to be fair. I mean, I love all my products. So,
I think I'm going to choose a whiskey and a mezcal, but I'm not choosing an overall favorite, because I don't think I can do that. I think the mezcal. I think the Derumbes was my favorite tonight.
Brava.
I just love the smell of it. It's just so. I've gone really into like savory things. I've moved away from sweetness as I've got older, and savory stuff really just I love it. So I think that was my favorite.
Yeah.
And then the whiskey, probably I think the Peat 45.
So pair number 2 has it.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh yeah.
Although
have you had dinner? Are you hungry? You're like, I want bar.
Yeah, so I think that's
there you go. Maybe that's
I do also like the yoichi as well. Oh,
the yoichi. Me too. I'm in love with yoichi.
Yeah. No, they're all delicious. They're all different, and I think that's the thing. Good. Oh, excellent.
Well, yeah. So thank you very much for your time, guys. I really appreciate all the time and effort you guys have put in over the past. God knows how many months of doing virtual tastings. But no, it's been really, really excellent to go through it. And I hope everyone's enjoyed it as well. If anyone does have any particular favourites, do let us know. Or any other questions about anything as well, do let us know. We can always pop them forward. I think we've got everything in stock at the moment. There are a few shortages on a few bits and pieces with things coming into the UK, a few delays, but we won't go into that too much now. We won't finish on that note. But yeah, we have got everything these in at the moment. So yeah, it's a really good sort of tastings, I think, to finish on, because it's not just a sort of, it's not kind of a singular thing of like, hey, we're doing whiskies today. It really does kind of open up a different window of spirits, and kind of makes people realize that there's certain spirits that are quite similar in flavor compounds. And
the world is out there.
Yes.
There's so much to try yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can, almost anything you can taste, you can try and work out the differences and the similarities between it. And I think that's the kind of awesome thing. And I think, you can have a lot of, brand or single category tastings, which are lovely, but to then think about things in a different direction, it's fun.
So I think we'll probably leave it there, because I realize we're nearly at 2 hours, but we've had lots of lovely things to taste. So yeah. So I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their evening, and we will see you soon. Thank you, guys. See you later.
Bye, Hannah. Thank you.